great to be here today and to kick off this event. As we were talking about it back in the office, TEDx is about great ideas and how you move great ideas, and your first speaker is a bureaucrat. I'm not sure how that all comes together, but CMAP was really created to be different, to think about ideas differently, to talk about how we plan for our regions in a different way. The challenges that we face in this country are metropolitan in scale, and the answers are regional answers. We need to think about it. Cities are too big, they're too small, states are too big. Regions are where things happen, whether it's transportation, whether it's natural resources, whether it's housing, most importantly, whether it's economic development, economic activity. Metropolitan regions drive this country, and we need to think about it in that way. CMAP is different in a number of ways. From our structure, our board is not just elected officials like most regional planning agency boards are. We include civic members, we include business members, and it gives us a unique perspective about how to handle the issues that we face as a region. Our staff is different. We are structured more like a project-based company. We're not a regular government organization. I'll tell you, it made our staff nervous at first about who signs my time cards and who approves my vacation. But we feel like we need to be project-oriented. We need to be implementation-oriented. I think the biggest difference between us and other regional agencies is that we're about implementation. Our board feels that the planning is vitally important, but at the end of the day, things have to happen. The planning is the first step. It's not the conclusion. And for too many regional agencies, once they develop a plan, and it looks really good, and it has pretty pictures, and they're done, and then it's somebody else's job to make that happen. And that's really not what our board feels. My background is actually in public policy and in Illinois DOT for many years, so I come from an implementing agency. I'm not a planner by trade, and I think that's one of the reasons the board hired me was they wanted us to think beyond the planning stage. The planning has to lead to getting things done. Go to 2040 is unique. We're not Portland, we're Chicago. And we tried to do something different, and everybody was watching saying, can Chicago do this? Because if Chicago can, then so can we, because we're not Portland either. So how do we come together around ideas about a plan that really makes sense in a broader scale? Go to 2040 is really only about two things. It's about economic prosperity and the strength of our communities. Everything leads to that, and we honestly believe you cannot have one without the other. You can't have strong communities if you're not creating jobs, and jobs don't get created where communities don't work well. And so we have to think about how to bring that together, and that's what Go to 2040 really is all about. The most impressive thing for me is the comprehensiveness of this plan. All regional plans talk about transportation, they might talk a little bit about land use, they might talk about natural resources. This plan talks about local food. The fact that 96% of the food that we eat in metropolitan Chicago comes from somewhere else, and so our money is going somewhere else. The fact that we don't provide healthy alternatives for enough of our residents in what they get to choose to eat every day. The fact that we are losing farm ground every minute out there, and we need to find a way to preserve some of the best farmland in this country. It was a unique thing. No other region really talked about local food the way that we do. The second is that we talk about education. The only plan in America, regional plan, that talks about education. And it's because we feel so strongly that if we don't do a better job of educating our children, of giving you all an opportunity for higher education, then we will fail as a country. It's just that simple. We have to do a better job, and although CMAP is not an expert in education, we didn't feel like we could talk about the success of a region if we didn't talk about the success or lack of success of our educational system. One that gets a lot of play for us is we talk about the fact that we simply have too many governments. We have 1,400 units of government in metropolitan Chicago, more than twice the next largest. We've got things from counties and cities to townships, to the dreaded mosquito abatement district. We simply have too many, and they're irresponsive. People don't know who to call when they have a problem, and they're inefficient. We talked to township officials about 2 months ago and said, so tell me why townships need to exist in an urban area. Rural areas, I understand. And they talk about the services they provide. and they're important services. My question was not whether we should get rid of the services, but why do you have to provide them? Why is it that the township needs to exist to provide that service? Why can't it be provided by our cities? Why can't it be provided by our counties? So we talk about things from a wide, comprehensive nature, which is different than other plans. And I think we talk about these 12 items that are in the plan because we think these 12 are the key to success. They're broken down into 4 different chapters. The first is livable community. A livable community is a really nice word because it can mean anything to anybody. I live here in the city. My brother lives out in McHenry County in the far reaches of the suburbs. We have very different ideas about what livable means. For me, it's having the compact design of having things right there for me that I can get to. The fact that I don't need a car and almost never use one is what makes a city livable. For him, it's access. It's the access issues that look differently. It's not necessarily about the public transit. It's about less traffic congestion. It's about good schools. It's about economic opportunity. But there are things like that no matter where you live, describe livability. Good schools, good jobs, access to economic opportunity, a place where you want to raise a family, a place that you want to stay. And I think that's what we try to talk about when we talk about what a livable community is. Part of that I'm just going to touch on one piece of all of these is in energy. We are trying to do something different in the energy field. We got a $25 million grant from the Department of Energy to do what we call market transformation. People understand that if you insulate your home, if you insulate your business, you're going to save money. It makes sense. It's just really hard to do. It's hard to figure out where the financing comes from. It's hard to figure out where you get a contractor. For contractors, it's hard to figure out where you get good workers. This program is really to try to simplify the market. And it's a long-term process. We are actually getting a lot of pressure from HUD to move in different directions, and we've said this is about long-term sustainability of an energy market. And that's what this program is trying to do. The second chapter is human capital. Again, this is where we are somewhat different, and we talk about education, we talk about workforce. I want to talk a little bit about innovation. We say consistently that innovation happens in the private sector. It happens in our great universities, it happens in our great resource centers, it doesn't happen in government. When we first started this plan and people wanted us to talk about innovation, they said, maybe we need an innovation czar, maybe we need an innovation committee. You put innovation in a government committee, it cannot possibly be innovation any longer. It has to come from the private sector, it has to come from our universities, and we need to think about that. We've lost our mojo a little bit in the Midwest about what we're doing in innovation. We used to lead, and now we're following. We still have great ideas, but we don't do as well as take that idea to product to market. We don't do that technology transfer in a way that we need to. We've got to bring our universities together to think about this in a different way, not individually, but how do we think about this together as a region? We also believe in innovation that you can't decide what you need to do if you aren't measuring it. What's success mean? And we've had a hard time with that in this area. What does success mean? Is it the number of patents? Is it the number of startups? How do you measure success? And so we're doing it with the Chamber, with World Business Chicago, with some other partners. We've created what we call the Innovation Index. You can go on our website, it's there. You can go on the Chamber's website, it's there. But it's really an attempt to measure where we are, where we're going, and how we stand up to the rest of the world. And there's 2 ways that we as CMAP want to use this. The first is, are we making progress? We have goals for where we want to be. Are we getting there or are we not? And if we're not measuring it, how can we know? The second is really, how do we compare to the rest of the world, which are our competitors? How do we think about that and what we need to do to change the way we're dealing with it? The third is efficient governance. And I talked a little bit about the fact that we have too many governments. That's one. The other is that we have a 1960s tax code in a 21st century economy. It doesn't work for government, it doesn't work for business, it doesn't work for individuals, and so we, through Go To 2040, put together a panel of experts that spent 9 months talking about state and local taxation, state and local tax policies. We got a lot of pushback when we started this. Why would a regional planning agency care about taxation and tax policy? And the answer is tax policy drives development decisions. We have a Walgreens on this corner and a Starbucks on that corner because of the retail tax policies we have, where sales tax is what budgets, what funds our local governments. Sales tax drives local economies. We have the kind of residential development that we have because property taxes pay for our schools. And so the question was, are we incenting the right things? How do we think about the incentives that we give in the taxes and the tax policy that we have? The fact that we don't tax services primarily in this state is a huge concern to us. 50 years ago, about 65% of purchasing was in goods. Now it's flipped, so about 60% is services, and yet we don't tax any of them. We're not suggesting that we raise taxes, and we're not in that mode, but we say, let's think about how much we can lower the tax on goods if we actually raise taxes on services. So what is that balance that not only gives us the kind of revenues we need for government to do what they need to do, but it's also the kind of incentives that will bring business into Chicago and into the metropolitan area. The last thing in the plan that I want to talk about is mobility. We spend a lot of money on transportation. Transportation is the economic driver of this region. It's why we exist. It is our global economic advantage, and if we don't invest in it, we lose jobs. It's just that simple. We have the basic system. For those of you that were here a few years ago when we were trying to get the Olympics, whatever your thoughts were on whether we should or shouldn't, we had a lot of conversations about the transportation system. And the bottom line for us is the basic system is in place. We need to bring it into the 21st century. We need to modernize it. We basically have third world transportation, and we're never going to be a first-class economy unless we invest in that. So what does modernization mean? I'll just give you a couple of examples. On the highway system, it means information. Nobody is sitting in traffic on purpose. Nobody's staying there longer than they need to. It's because we don't give them very good information. We've got these overhead message signs on our highways that tell me how late I'm going to be. That's all they tell me. There is one place, if you're coming in from Rockford and towards the city, where you have a choice to take the Kennedy or the Eisenhower, and it tells you how long each way, about 200 feet after you have to make a decision on which one to take. We need to give people good information. We need to give them information not only about which highway to take, but which mode to take. Can I take transit in a different way? Can I think about that? We need to talk about transit and public transit in a new way. We need to talk about the 21st century transit right, what we call the discretionary transit right. The person that has a car, the person that has access to an automobile, but doesn't want to use it for every trip. How do we create the kind of experience that makes that worthwhile to them? Because at the end of the day, it's about comparing experiences. It's about comparing a transit experience to one sitting in a car with your own music and probably on your cell phone, but probably sitting in traffic. How does that experience relate to the fact that at Metro we're still talking about whether we should have Wi-Fi on our trains? Now, that's silly. We need to move forward. The fact that our CTA rail cars and our Metro rail cars are almost exactly the same cars that we used in the 1950s. The same company that's building them for us is building them for China and building cars for India that people actually want to ride in. They're comfortable, they get people there in a more efficient way and make the experience better. And that's what we think is most important. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about implementation, because that is what it's all about. We were fortunate the day after by the way, the plan was adopted exactly 2 years ago today, the 13th of October, 2 years ago. So thanks for the celebration. But it was an interesting day because as we were walking through this, we had 1,000 people at the announcement of a plan. When I took this job, if you had told me we'd get 10 people at the announcement of a plan, I would have said, wow, that's about right. But the reason for that is that this wasn't really CMAP's plan. It was the region's plan. They helped write it. It was their ideas that drove it, and they felt ownership of it. We were talking earlier, someone had asked me, would it have been easier for you to write this plan if you were Daniel Burnham? I said, absolutely, because he didn't ask anybody what anybody thought. He was able to sit in his office and write a plan. This plan belongs to the residents, the businesses, the governments in Northeastern Illinois. It doesn't belong to CMAP. And that's why we're able to get people engaged. That's why they felt an ownership of it. And that's why implementation is actually happening. That day, Senator Durbin was one of our speakers, and he said, "Randy, do you have a minute?" I said, "Well, I'm about to introduce Mayor Daley. Can it wait?" He said, "No, why don't you take a walk with me?" And he said, "You're going to get a call this afternoon, and you're going to get a grant from HUD to start implementing the plan. $4.25 million to start it tomorrow," which really jumpstart the way we were able to think about how we implement this, who gets engaged. CMAP doesn't have a lot of authority. We don't do things on our own. We do things with partners. So we've really used these funds to hire expert staff to go in and help communities implement the portions of the plan that work for them. It's not us coming and saying, "You're going to do A, B, and C." It's them coming to us and saying, "Here's where our need is. Here's how it fits into the bigger regional picture. Can you help us do that?" And so we're doing everything from sustainability plans for Park Forest, to economic development plans in the south suburbs, to new job opportunities in the city, and we're able to help communities think about what they want to be in the long term. It's a huge step. Maybe as important is that it's helped us with our policy issues. There were a lot of people that when we were created thought, here's a new layer of government, they're going to come in and they're going to tell us how to develop our land, they're going to tell us what to do, and they were a little afraid of it. We've said specifically, local land use in Illinois will always be local. Those decisions will always be at the local level, and that's where they should be. But how they fit into a bigger context is what's important. How do they relate to their neighbors? How do they relate to the transportation system? How do they relate to housing? Those are the things that we care about. So as we've done this local technical assistance program, people have realized, well, maybe CMAP isn't the bad guy that's out to take our power. Maybe they're here to help us, and it's really helped with our policy discussion. We've gotten new partners that are with us as we talk about housing, that are with us as we talk about tax policy, and that are with us as we talk about new ways to